Hey everyone, welcome to part 2 of this series on Inertia.js. Here's the app we're going to be building. So this is an Inertia app and it's using Go as the backend. We have a simple Pokedex. We can click on a Pokemon link. We get a name, a number, an image, a type, and some stats. And using these links at the bottom, I can click through the different Pokemon. And I can also jump back to the Pokedex. So let's jump in. So we're going to start out with an empty directory for our project. I've created a directory called Inertia.js Go Echo Adapter. So I will just open that up in VS Code and I'll full screen it. And the first thing I will do is open up the terminal and start a new Git project. Now what I'll do is I'll add a README about the project. So now is a good time to give you a quick overview of what we will be building and just set some expectations. So we're going to be building a simple Inertia.js based app. The backend will be using Go, and Echo is the name of the web framework that we'll be using with Go. If you've ever used something like Express before, you can sort of see the gist. So here is a get handler for the index path, and you can specify a function on what to return. You don't really have to know Go to understand what we'll be doing. I'll kind of explain any nuances, and in general the code is quite simple, but I wanted to use Go just to show the fact that you can have a backend that's in a completely different language to power your client-side React app. In terms of the Inertia.js protocol, we're not going to be implementing the entirety of it, just the HTML responses and the Inertia responses. To do that, we'll be also adding the page object, and that's just to keep things simple. This will get us most of the functionality that I showed in the sort of quick preview. I'm not going to be really focusing on tons of error handling, and the Go code I'll be adding won't be perfect. It's not necessarily how you would do things for a production system. So let's start building. One other thing to mention is we'll be using a project called Vite to create a starter app for our front-end assets and components. So if I go to the Vite website, Vite's basically a more modern version of Create React App. I won't go into too much detail, but it will handle all of the building and such of the front end for us and basically give us a project to start with easily. So I'll hop to get started, and what I'm going to do is create a project using npm. So I'll hop back to my terminal session in VS Code and I'll run npm create Vite at latest, and I'm going to call the directory that this project is going to be in views, since it's going to be our view layer. I'll hit enter. I will choose React as the framework and we'll just go with JavaScript, and it's scaffolded that for us. Now to make sure things are installed, I'm going to cd into views and run npm install. Okay, now that things have installed, what I'm going to do is just check that everything is running as expected. So to do that, I can run npm run dev. That's going to start the Vite dev server, and I can see it's running on localhost 5137. I'm just going to copy that, pop it into my browser, and I can see that it is running and things have loaded correctly. So now that we have our Vite project set up, we're going to run a couple of steps just to get files sorted in the way that we want them. So I'll start out by just renaming the index file. And I've just renamed index.css to main.css so that we can have these files being aligned to one another. I'm just going to check that things still load as expected, and they do. Next, we're going to install the Inertia.js React package. We can find out how to do that from the Inertia.js website. So I'll copy that and run it. Next up, what we're going to do is modify the Vite template that we have to load up Inertia.js. So on the Inertia.js website, they have instructions on how to initialize the app. So I'm going to just take these and replace what we have here. I'm going to change this to lowercase pages and then get rid of what I had before. And what this does is it's going to bootstrap the Inertia app for us. One thing it says on the Inertia website is how to specify your root element. So if I just jump back to this, at the bottom, it can say how you define a root element. By default, the root element ID is app, so I'm going to just change that in my application for it to be app. So I'll open up index.html and replace that with app. I'm also going to add a data page attribute that specifies what component should be loaded. So what I've done here is specified a data page attribute that has a component of app and a URL specified. This is going to tell Inertia.js what component to load up. If I jump back to the main.jsx, this resolve section says how to load up a specific page. So if I want to load this app component, I'm going to have to move it into the pages folder. So I'm going to, first of all, create a new pages folder and then move these two files into it. Styling wise, I'm going to make a modification to default styles here. Instead of there being a root component, I've changed this to be ID. So I'm going to change that to be app. And I'm also going to change the import path for this asset. Now I'm going to run it and give it a test again. So I go back to the app and things are loaded. And if I inspect the page, I can see that there is the div with an ID of app and its data page attribute specified as well. What I'm going to do is just rename app to index, since this is going to become our index page, and then make sure any imports are updated. I also need to make sure I update the component that's specified in this index.html. Instead of it being app, that's now going to be index. And now I can just check and make sure things are loaded as I expected. So the page is still loading and it's still working. Now I'm going to add a file to make things a little bit easier for myself. It's called a make file, and it will make it so that I can specify a target to run on the command line, and then I don't have to remember the specific npm command to run. So I'm just going to add the target now. So what I've added here is a target called dev-client. What it's going to do is run the command npm --prefix.views run dev. And what this is the equivalent of is running npm run dev in the views directory. So I can now go to the root directory of the project. I can run make dev client, and it's going to run that command for me. This is just a build environment variable that will be injected into this running process.